you're Sunnah or Shia, there is defined stations within namaz. You have the station of qiyam, where you're standing, ruku', sujood, and when you're sitting. So all of these things are very defined. And you say very different things through all of these stations. You speak differently. And what's even more interesting is that the most important thing in your namaz is Surah Al-Fatiha. The first Takbirat al-Ihram, of course, but then Surah Al-Fatiha. Every namaz you do has got Surah Al-Fatiha in it. And when you sit down and you examine Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Fatiha actually is a very powerful, very beautiful dua. Some people sometimes they say that, dua is when you speak to Allah and Quran is when Allah speaks back to you. Many people have said this, many among the ulama have said this, I've said this myself. And while this is true, it needs to be understood that within Quran you also have dua. Because Allah hasn't left. Look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that after Rasulullah what happened would happen. This is not something that was hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was a fitna, a test for us, the fruit of which we reap today, the fruit of which resulted in Karbala, and so on. Therefore, and because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is adil, He is the most just. He's not going to allow a situation to come around where someone who professes his tawheed, someone who says La ilaha illallah, and someone who says Muhammad Rasulullah, can turn around to him and say, look, I didn't know how to make this dua. What's all this about? This is something that the Shia have, for example. So within Quran, there are dua, many, many dua. And you have the dua of the Anbiya. You have, for example, dua I recited at the beginning of the session, which was رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Let's just examine what this means. It's the dua of Nabi Musa before he was going to Fir'aun, before he went to confront Fir'aun and tell him to release the Hebrews, release the children of Israel who were in captivity. Now you have to put it all into context. Everything needs to be understood with the context of its time. If you don't understand the context, you will never understand the full meaning. Before I continue, I'm going to apologize slightly in advance. There will be parts of this series of sessions which will come out a little bit dry, because the subject is quite a heavy subject, and while I generally try and keep it interesting and keep it flowing, there are some things which I can't do that to. It's just beyond my ability, and this is the shortcoming on my side. So I hope, inshallah, you forgive me and Allah forgives me for that. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So if we look at the dua of Nabi Musa, he says, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Now Nabi Musa was given a job by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a Nabi of Allah, someone who is divinely inspired by Allah, someone who is ma'soom, someone who is infallible, who does not make mistakes. Do you really think Nabi Musa, when he was confronting Fir'aun, he was frightened for even a second? No. It would be silly to assume this. Yet Nabi Musa made a dua. Why did he make this dua? It's very interesting when you think about it like this. Is he, for example, he's bored before he's going, and so he decides, I'm going to say this? No, because everything that all of the prophets said was a lesson for everyone. Nabi Musa says, expand my chest, meaning make me brave, make me strong, make me able to handle difficult situations. وَيَسِّرْ لِي عَمْرِي. And make my job, my task, make it simple, make it something easy for me. وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. And remove any impediment, any problem in my speech so that the people understand me. This is very important. Now the Nabi of Allah, Musa, when he is speaking, there is no room that someone will not understand. There is no possibility that the subject, that the person he's speaking to will not understand. If that was the case, he can't be ma'soom. It goes against the isma of the Nabi. Right? But why is Nabi Musa, and we are told in Quran, why is Nabi Musa saying this? We have to understand what is the reason for this. And if we understand the reason for this, we will understand the whole reason for any dua. Any dua you do anywhere. The dua you do when you're leaving your home. The dua a young man does when he's looking for a wife. The dua someone does when they've got an exam and they need to pass their exam. You will understand this idea of dua. First of all, in dua, what you're doing is yes, on the surface it's like you're talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that has a requirement. For example, I'm sitting over here, I'm speaking to my brothers and sisters over here. For me to do that, I have to acknowledge that you are there. I have to accept and believe and have respect for the people I am speaking to. I have to be respectful. I have to accept and acknowledge your existence prior to speaking to you. If I don't acknowledge your existence, I could be sitting in a field somewhere and talking straight into the grass, for example, and I would be considered insane. The first rule of dua is you must acknowledge the person you're making dua to. In order to acknowledge who you're making dua to, you immediately have to acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it rounds you back, it forces you back to Tawheed. Right? Every dua you make, even when you sit down and you make ziyarah, you make ziyarat for something, for Imam Hussein, ziyarat Ashura, anything. After ziyarat Ashura, we recite dua al-alqamah. And even within ziyarat Ashura, there are certain portions where we say Allahumma something or the other. Allahumma la'an Aba Sufyan wa kaza wa kaza. Right? Oh Allah, remove your mercy from these people. In order to ask someone something, you must acknowledge their existence. This is very important. And not only must you acknowledge their existence, you must know, accept, and understand that they are on a position above you. Consider this. You have a family, normal family, husband, wife, and children. The father, when he asks the child, knows the child is his junior. Right? Remember this. And so the way the father will ask, of course in Muslim families it's different, there is respect all around, but I'm just giving a general example. When you're asking someone less than you, or lower than you, or smaller than you, there is a different stance you take. When you're asking someone who is your peer, it's a different stance you take. And when you're asking someone who is above you, let's say you go to your boss and you want to ask for a pay raise, or you want to go to immigration and do some, I don't know, get a visa for somewhere or something. Suddenly your entire tone changes. The way you ask, the way you communicate with these people changes. It's very different. There is a certain state of mind that you go into that room with. If you have, for example, if you want to go and get a visa to go somewhere, before you go in the room, even if that is a country you're not happy about, but you need to go and get the visa, that happens, or you get, you're going through immigration and they need to stamp your passport. Even if it's a country you know is a zalim country. For example, for Hajj. If you're going to Hajj or Umrah, inshallah, everyone gets the opportunity. When you're going somewhere, and even when you know it's a zalim sitting there, who is going to take your money and stamp something, you want something from that person. You acknowledge that this person has an authority over you. So you will be respectful. You'll be very polite, very nice. You won't question them. You'll just, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. This is normal. Whether it's right or wrong is another discussion for another day, but this is normal. So when we make any sort of dua, this dua forces us to acknowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. When we think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be thinking of the person who announces himself as Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulk. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. That He is the one who has the absolute dominion, who has absolute authority over everything. And He has power over everything. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do anything. He can remove the oxygen from this room. He can make this chair fall. He can do anything. He has absolute power over everything. Having absolute power and using absolute power are two different things. Having and using are two different things. A person who has, an entity that has absolute power, doesn't need to use it. But the one who doesn't have it constantly tries to use what they give the impression of as being absolute power. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Can I get some water, please? So when you look at this dua of Nabi Musa is telling Bani Israel, he's telling the people around him that first, I recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. Secondly, this job is very difficult. Going in front of this zalim called Fir'aun and telling him to release these people who have been his slaves for God knows how many years, this is not something small. And there is a high possibility that Fir'aun will attack him and have his guards kill him and so on and so forth. So he is telling the people that my belief, my understanding, Nabi Musa's understanding is such that I accept, first of all, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. I know that Allah will expand my chest. He is my shield. He is my defender. In any task I have to do, I know Allah is my defender. This connects to something else. In zikr, when you're making zikr, one of the famous zikr is what? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. That there is no power or superiority except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So when Nabi Musa is saying that Allah, Rabbi shrah li sadri, expand my chest, meaning make me strong, make me feel strong, give me confidence. He is telling Bani Israel, don't be worried. He is telling his ashab, do not be worried, do not be concerned, do not be worried about what going in front of Fir'aun is about. Allah is there, and Allah is the one who will protect us, and have no doubt about this. Then he says, وَيَسِّرْ لِي عَمْرِي. Now this is interesting. This task that Nabi Musa has got to do is not a small job. To go up in front of a zalim hukmran, go up in front of someone who is a zalim mutlaq, someone who is no qualms about cutting someone, or killing someone, or harming someone, or usurping the rights of someone. To do this is not something small. It takes effort, it takes a certain personality, it takes conviction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your support. It is the same conviction that we were taught about in Karbala, not from any of the adults, but from that 6-month-old child. That 6-month-old child, when he jumped out of the cot, that child knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, that Allah will protect him. When Imam Hussein took the child and showed it to the enemy, and the child took its tongue and put it on its lips, showing the enemy how dry it is, this was not a random action. This was to show people, to convince people that, look, I know Allah is my protector. You kill me, so what? Kullu man alayha fan. Everyone is going to die. It is the aqibah that is the important thing. And Allah says, وَالْآقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The end, aqibah means end. Sorry, one thing which I should say. Sometimes I say words which maybe you may not understand. If you don't understand anything, feel free to interject during the session. This is not a majlis in the traditional sense, it's a discussion. And those of you who've heard me before know that I prefer to have like a two-way discussion where I need to know that the audience is understanding what I'm saying, because otherwise You're wasting your time, and I'm wasting my time. So give me a salawat, please. So Nabi Musa, his second point in the dua is, and make my task easy for me. This is a task, his people know how difficult this task is. They know he's going in front of this zalim, they know there's a possibility he will be killed, etc., etc., etc. But he is telling them in making this dua that I don't have this concern. This task is easy for me because the one I worship is going to make it easy for me. The one who has absolute power over everything is going to make this task easy for me. And the last portion is what? وَحْلُلْ أُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Some people say, some historians say that Nabi Musa used to stutter. He used to have a stutter. And we have an example of this actually here in Leicester actually. Because one of the teachers, one of the alims, Sheikh Mujtaba, I heard this from him, that he has a stutter. He has a stutter. This is something, it's known. But when he goes and gives a session, gives a lesson, the stutter goes away. When he's having a normal conversation, sure, it's there. He's talking about football or the cars or whatever, it's there. But when he's giving information about Islam, when he's giving Islam, when he's giving Ahlul Bayt's message and Qur'an's message, the stutter just disappears. This itself requires thought, requires reflection. Because Nabi Musa, whether he had a stutter or whether he didn't have a stutter, this is a historical point, we're not going to go into history. But he went in front of Fir'aun, and what happened, happened. And Fir'aun was forced to release Bani Israel, and Fir'aun was then drowned in the sea when he decided to renege on what he has said. So he was destroyed. The Nabi of Allah achieved the goal that he had been given. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Connecting across from this, we also have very famous hadith from Ahlul Bayt, which say dua silahul mu'min, that dua is the weapon of the believer. When you sit down and you look at this on the surface, you scratch your head and you think, what's this man talking about? Dua? Dua is something I read, sometimes maybe makes me emotionally cry. How is it the weapon of the believer? Again, this requires reflection and connects to what I've been saying. In any situation, regardless of what the situation is, if you are stood in a situation where you are against dhulm, against oppression, against tyranny, against evil, then the person standing against this needs to understand a very important thing that was given to us by a story, by a hadith of Rasulullah. Whether this historical event is actually real or not, I don't know. I'm not a historian. But the anecdote, the story, the message it provides is an important one. So we'll say that, and I think we'll finish around that. It was said one time Rasulullah was traveling somewhere. And in other versions, it's been Imam Ali, but it doesn't matter. Any one of the Ahlul Bayt, someone was traveling, going down a road. And some bandits came and attacked him. A bandit, came and attacked him. And of course, the person put up a fight and overpowered the bandit. Overpowered him as in he had authority over the bandit. The bandit's now on the floor. The bandit overpowered the Ma'soom. The bandit overpowered the Ma'soom. At that point, the bandit's got his sword to the neck of the Ma'soom, and he's saying, who is going to help you now? So the Ma'soom says, Allah. They start fighting again. And this time the Ma'soom overpowers the criminal. The Ma'soom then asks the criminal, so who do you think is going to help you? There are different versions of this. This is one version. The criminal turns around and says, there is no one to help me. The Ma'soom tells him, no, the same Allah who helped me is going to help you, can help you. But you have to acknowledge him. You have to know that he is there. Consider, you're walking down the street. Someone, God forbid, attacks you. If you don't see anyone else around, you don't know which direction to scream for help. If you haven't acknowledged that there is, Mr. Smith over there who can help you, if you haven't acknowledged him, you can't shout in his direction. You'll shout on that direction where nobody is there. So you have to acknowledge the existence of someone before they can help you. And Allah keeps talking about his existence in Quran so many times. He says, we are closer to you than your jugular vein. That I know more about what you do than even you. I know your secrets, hidden or revealed. Dua Kumail, we say this. We speak about this, and inshallah we'll come to Dua Kumail. The first and the most important rule of dua is that we must acknowledge who we are making dua to. Someone can sit down and every day, we have this famous hadith about dua ahad. It is said that dua ahad, if you recite 40 times, 40 days in a row, that you will, inshallah, visit Imam Mahdi. And if you're unable to be there for his duhur, then you will be raised from your grave with your sword in your hand and ready to assist the Imam. And inshallah, all of us get this opportunity. But consider someone who recites dua ahad, but doesn't quite understand and appreciate Allah or Imam. He has shak, he has doubt about Imam. Dua ahad is when you are making a pledge of allegiance. You are making allegiance. You are saying, Mawla, when my life is your life. You're saying, to quote, today's terms, I'll take a bullet for you. This is not a small thing. It's a huge responsibility. It's a commitment. The idea of giving allegiance to the Ma'soom is not something small. So you have to acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order for your dua to be mustajab. Of course, Allah is Rahman Rahim. We know this. And there are times where we might feel that we can make a dua very quickly without really acknowledging him, and it happens. But let's understand one thing. The real benefits of dua is not in this world. In this world, it's nice. Sometimes, alhamdulillah, Allah helps us in this world. But if he doesn't choose to help us in this world, and we are sincere to him, then in a way it's actually very good. It's very good. Because he's keeping all of that ajr, all of that reward, so that on the next day, you have no issues. In barzakh, you have no issues. This is the type of thing we should be thinking about. I'm going to finish now because I believe we have dua samat, which is also another important dua. But one of the results I would really like as part of this series of sessions is for us to begin to develop a closeness with Allah. Because all of these situations that are currently happening in the world today, be it the situation with Daesh or ISIS or ISIL or whatever they're called this weekend, the situation in Pakistan, the situation in Palestine, the situation of poverty in this country and in America and in other parts of the West, the oppression of what is commonly known as the 99% by the 1%, all of these issues are leading to something. They're not just arbitrary, random issues. And there is a big, very important lesson for us. This idea of, we have this very simple dua called أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Everyone recites this. Everyone recites this every day. But we should go away and think about what this is saying. We should think about what the connect is with our situation. And also, over the course of these sessions, we will be looking at dua is not something which is just a spiritual thing. Dua can give you strategy, real strategy. The same strategy that helped Amir al-Mu'mineen lift the door of Khaybar. Strategy. The same strategy that helped our brothers in Lebanon liberate Qusayr in Syria. The same strategy that is helping our brothers in Iraq take out the Takfiris from the areas they have occupied. This is from dua. If you understand what Imam Khomeini, Qudus Sirruh al-Sharif, or Sayyid al-Khoi, or Sayyid Sistani, or even Sayyid al-Qa'id, if you understand the way they understood dua, if you understand the way many of the commanders understood dua, if you understand the way Shaheed Arif of Pakistan, the way he understood dua, then believe me, even the smallest of us can create an earthquake where the Zalimeen will fall. Oh Allah, please help us understand your magnificence and your beauty and make us closer to you and make us among those people who please Imam Mahdi and not among those who upset him. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect Muslims and all of Islam. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect all of the ulama, all of the maraji, and especially the leader, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. وآخر الدعوان الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم.